Hello, Philip Hinkle here, back with another Mercalli V4 tutorial video. Today we're going to cover using the Mercalli V4 Stabilizr and cmosFIXR plugins in Sony Vegas Pro. I have a copy of Vegas Pro 13 going, and I have dropped a clip in. As you can see, it's the end of a bike ride I recently did. It was a 150-mile ride, and this is the finish line, so you can see what it looks like to cross the finish after an exhausting ride. And look at the footage. It's got some vibrations and some shakes and some wobble in it. We're going to use the plugin from Mercalli version 4 right here in Vegas to fix that, and I'm going to show you how it all works. So here we go. There are actually now two different plugin filters. One is called the cmosFIXR to correct your CMOS problems, and the other is called the Mercalli V4 Stabilizr. We're going to use both of those new plugin filters in this tutorial. First thing you do is we come over here and we need to add the filter. Once you've installed the plugin, you will see any third-party ones you have right down here. I have some others, but the ones we want to deal with are the cmosFIXR from proDAD and Mercalli version 4. We want to add both of those filters to this clip, so I'm going to click Add and OK. And now you can see up here in my hierarchy, I have the cmosFIXR before the proDAD Mercalli. It's very important that the cmosFIXR comes higher in the priority than the Mercalli one. The CMOS has to be processed and fixed before Mercalli does its work. First thing, let's look at the cmosFIXR. Okay, there's a couple of options here in the box. There's presets. There's super fast and precise. I always want precise. Yeah, it'll take a little longer, but I want it to be good. So I always check precise. Click the twirl down for rendering, and there's options here. There's wobble vibrations, precise GPU, a fast GPU, or a quick repair. If it's not bad, you can use quick. If you need it to pre-process really quick and get it done fast, you can select the fast GPU and may not be quite as good. We have the time, so we're going to go for it and go for precise GPU with wobble and vibrations. There's a remap mode. I always leave that at cubic. It seems to do just fine for 99% of what I do. The avoid border we're also going to leave at the defaults. Next is our sensor. Before cmosFIXR can do its magic, it needs to learn the characteristics of the camera's CMOS sensor, which it does by analyzing some of the video to learn the sensor's capture speed and other characteristics. Once this is known, cmosFIXR can correct the distortions automatically. I'm going to go ahead and click the estimate button so the cmosFIXR can go out and do that magic and figure out all the characteristics of your CMOS sensor. It's going to take a few minutes. I will catch back up to you when it's done. Okay, my estimate has finished, and it looks like we found a sensor speed of about 1.2. One thing I want to show you before I continue is I loaded the cmosFIXR and the Mercalli V4 plugin. We really don't need the Mercalli V4 plugin right now because it's showing up on our screen over here covering what we're doing. So I'm just going to turn that off with the check mark. And as you can see, there's my video clip. If I come down here to the view mode, which I have opened up, you can see there are options for view result. There's a horizontal compare where you can see it side by side. There's a vertical compare where you can compare your footage top to bottom, or you can just view your source footage. We're going to put it back on, actually I'm going to put it on horizontal compare. Once back on my timeline, I need to render my footage so I can see what the content looks like. So I'm going to do that and we'll come right back. Okay, I've rendered a portion of our footage. On the left side of the screen, we're going to see our footage unfixed and untouched. On the right side of our screen, we'll see the footage that was fixed with cmosFIXR. Let's take a look. Look at that. A lot of the shakes and vibrations are just gone on the right side of the screen. cmosFIXR has already cleaned our footage up into a very respectable looking clip. Let's open our effects back up. And now let's turn off the horizontal compare and just leave it on view result. Now let's go back and check the Mercalli, and let's jump in and see if we can smooth out some of the side to side wobble and shake in it and make it even smoother. Okay, remember I mentioned at the beginning of the tutorial that cmosFIXR has to be in line before the Mercalli plugin. The CMOS has to be repaired before stabilization is done. Okay, once that's done, we're going to click on the Mercalli plugin. And now let's walk our way through some of the settings here. I'm going to flip the twirl down for the camera. Here's where you can select the kind of camera you want, a universal camera, sports cam, glide cam, rock steady cam, or a forensics camera. Not going to dive real heavy into those, but I am going to use the universal. In my experience, that has been, for the most part, the most successful one. Now here is where you have to pay attention. See where it says rolling shutter compensation? We are going to uncheck that. That sounds counterintuitive because the rolling shutter, the CMOS, is what's causing a lot of our problems. But we fixed it back here in the cmosFIXR. Because we have run that, we now have to turn off the rolling shutter compensation. If we were just using Mercalli standalone without the cmosFIXR because we had a little wobble in our video, then maybe we would want to use that rolling shutter compensation to get some of that skew, like where a flagpole or a fence post gets crooked, or a mailbox when you're moving the camera back and forth. That would fix that, but we've already fixed those things with the cmosFIXR, so we need to turn that off. The next option down is the used camera optics. This is where you can select the kind of camera you were using. If you had a regular traditional camera with no fisheye on it, like a handheld camera or DSLR, you'd probably say without fisheye. But Mercalli is written mostly to take advantage of action cameras and fix up their footage. So let's see if they have what we had. I had a Sony action cam, and I'm going to select the AS100V because it's almost identical to the camera I was using. I'm going to leave the Keep Camera Dynamic option checked. If you turn that off, then the stabilization assumes you were wanting to be on a tripod, and it tries to make your footage as still as a tripod, which when you've got moving footage, it'll actually make it worse. So we're going to leave it in this particular case as dynamic because we want it to have some of that fluid motion like it was on a bike. The rest of the options I will show you in a little bit. The next thing we need to do is to analyze our video now. So I'm going to click Analyze. It's going to go through and do its thing, and when it's finished, we will come back and continue on. Okay, the Analyze video is just wrapping up. And now, as you can see, our error message on the screen has gone away. Let's see how our footage looks now. I'm going to close that window and come back to our timeline. Going to set me a little bit of a closer out point, and I'm going to render. Again, this will take a few minutes, and I will be back with you when it's all rendered so we can see what it looks like. Okay, our rendering is done. Let's see how that looks. Looks pretty good. We've pretty much gotten rid of all the vibrations. You can barely even tell they exist. Occasionally there's a little bit of a bump in there, but that looks pretty darn good. Now, one thing I want to show you down here under the view mode, if you wanted to go down and use the horizontal compare again, you could do that. You could do the vertical compare, or you could just view the original source to compare your footage before and after. It's the very same thing as what we used with the cmosFIXR. We're just going to leave it on the full screen and leave it alone for right now. Let me touch on a few of these other options. Let me show you one of the other options. Let's look at the chart option. I'm going to turn that on. I'm just going to turn it on for the pan. And as you can see here, we've got some wavy lines on here. These are basically showing you Mercalli in action. There is an option for the extra high view. I'm going to turn that on. There's a couple things I want to show you in here. Essentially, you're seeing here the action and corrections that Mercalli is making. See these two red lines? These are spots where Mercalli just couldn't keep up, and it needs a little bit of extra help. So if I come up here to avoid border and I push the avoid border out, you see those lines disappeared. This is a way for you, if this was a spot where it was just a bad bump and you're willing to live with it, you could turn it down and you would keep more of the resolution of your video. Because when you do this, avoid border, the higher you get to the right, the more it has to crop your video in. My experience has been, unless that's a really bad bump right there, if we just slide that avoid border over until it just disappears, we pretty much get the maximum benefit out of what Mercalli is doing. If you remember, after our analyze, this was sitting on 0.3. It's sitting on 0.41 now. So I'm going to leave it right there, and we'll probably get a little tiny bit better quality stabilization out of it. Okay, I've shown you the charts. There's different kinds of charts. There's one for the roll where you can see what it was doing. There's one for the zoom, which we haven't messed with. There's one for the CMOS sensor, which we're not worrying about, the x-axis, and dynamic scaling. There's all kind of different things, and I'm going to give you some little hints about those here in a second. Just want to let you know there's a lot of charts here where you can see Mercalli in action and what it's doing. I'm going to actually turn the charts off now because I'm done with them. Okay, let's dive into some of these other options. The rendering. I always leave it on cubic and leave it alone. I don't usually even mess with this option. Again, you've got your little clocks here where you can open it up and you can do keyframing if you need to do that. I haven't found a need to do that in Mercalli, but it is very possible to do. Now this is where it gets interesting. Advanced settings. There's all kind of almost unlimited options down here where you can modify things. Let's turn our chart back on. I'm going to turn on the pan and I'm going to turn it on the extra high view. Okay, if I move my pan shot smoothing slider, you can see it's doing different things. My little lines come back. Maybe we probably don't want that. So you can see also that the footage is being cropped in and out a little bit. This is just one of the ways you can tweak your footage to your liking. There's also one for roll. If I come up here to my chart and I turn on roll, I can see my roll compensation. If I want to try and get rid of those lines, I can tweak that until they disappear. Let's go back to the pan shot smoothing. Turn on the pan. There were no lines there, so we're probably cleaned up pretty well there. Going to turn both of those off. There's a border option. You can select different kinds of borders. My experience has been, for the most part, the best border is your option of choice. And also you'll want to leave the video color filling on. What that does is if it senses an area that's so bad where the video actually moves off the screen and has to rotate off the screen with the cropping not being big enough, it'll actually try and fill in colors from around it to make it match. So if you had a blue sky up here and it had to rotate this way because of a bounce, it would try and fill in that black hole with the blue around it. This will allow you to sometimes zoom out a little bit more and save some of your resolution and let the magic of Mercalli kind of fill in some colors for you. If it's something that your viewer may not see or notice, it's probably okay to do that. Normally I just leave that on best border. Perspective. This is where you can actually work with the X, Y, and Z axis of your stabilization. If I click on the XY axis and I turn this on, I don't have it enabled. If I enable it, then I can see my x-axis and I can adjust the compensation on the x-axis if I think my footage needs that kind of help. The same with the y and the zoom. So let's turn our charts all back off. There's a fade in and fade out, so you can actually fade up and fade down if you want to. If you twirl down the image, you can actually scale your footage, which you probably don't want to do. I'm going to set that back to 1. And you can even rotate it if you need to, because maybe you were filming a little crooked or your camera was mounted crooked. But if you needed to, you certainly could scale it. We're going to set that back to 1 because we want to leave it straight. I'm not going to dive in today into these advanced settings and try and explain all the things that they do. I have done a number of advanced tutorials for Mercalli version 4 SAL Plus, which is our standalone application, and it's very similar to the plugin application. If you go to our YouTube channel, proDAD USA on YouTube, again that's proDAD USA on YouTube, you dig down through there are a number of advanced tutorials that talk about the pan shot and the roll, what the border means, how it works. A lot of the information in those tutorials applies to these same settings in the plugin. If you want to really dig in and learn more about how to really optimize your video to its fullest, that's the place to go. That's pretty much all that I need to cover with the cmosFIXR and the Mercalli version 4 plugins for Vegas. I exported our footage to a final file so I could see exactly how all of our stabilization and CMOS fixes worked. So let's take a look. As you can see where those bumps were, there's hardly even a notice of a bump in there. So the plugins here for the cmosFIXR and Mercalli seem to have done a very, very fine job. I hope this helps you stabilize your footage a little bit and make your footage the best it can be. Enjoy using the plugins, and we'll see you next time.